Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Conversations with Coaches podcast. I have already been having an excellent conversation today with Stephen Webster. Stephen helps growth-minded business leaders ignite next-level growth through performance coaching, business systems, and technology. He is the CEO of Wellfleet Enterprises, recent graduate of the Zero to Dangerous Peak Performance Training Program, which I'll have to ask about at some point, mentor and advisor to individuals and organizations across business. Stephen, I'm already grateful to speak with you today. I'm so glad you're on the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Well, Kevin, thank you so much for having me. I'm very much looking forward to our conversation. And like you mentioned, we already kick-started it. So I'm looking forward to continuing it with you. So thank you again.
Yeah, I kept having to break our conversation to remember to hit record. So I know this is going to be a great one. Let me start with what I've cheekily called my superhero origin story question sometimes. How did you, and I'll ask it kind of in two parts, how did you realize that you wanted to be or already were a coach or coaching? And how did you go from that realization that coaching, I think, is who I am or what I want to do, and how to serve? And how did you turn that into the coaching business you have today?
Yeah, Kevin, I started my career more in corporate America. So I started my career learning, right? And learning from great leaders and great business people. And as I continued to sort of climb the corporate ladder, I found that so much of what I was doing was teaching. And whether that was teaching peers in certain things where I had a discipline or a skill, or teaching other folks that are on the team to do things a little bit differently or to think outside the box. So it was like a natural thing for me to just start to do that. And I found great joy in doing it, even at the earliest stages of my career. So even though I didn't start my coaching practice until 12 years ago, I was sort of always doing it. And as I, became president of companies and I ran divisions and I had big staffs, I actually was doing it at a time where it was management by walking around. I know you can't do that anymore. It's like, how do you walk around a Zoom meeting, right? But management by walking around enabled me to really connect with everyone that was working with me to help, one, get to know them a little bit better, but two, dive into the things that were on their mind, dive into those opportunities, to debate those with them, right, in a thoughtful way, to have conversations that got them thinking about things differently than maybe the way they were originally thinking about it. So it just sort of continued to evolve. So the great satisfaction that I was getting from those discussions and the feedback that I was receiving, it was kind of like, what would Webster say was what they would come up with, right? So I was receiving great feedback from all of the people that I was working with as well. And one thing led to another. And it's like, what? There's too many signals here around being a coach or doing something that I really love. So maybe this is something that I indeed should pursue.
So it really it seems like it grew inside you in the same way that you were a leader, where you were kind of like leading from alongside, where it's like it's sort of growing and evolving in parallel to everything else you're doing. I say in parallel, it's actually more like a braided rope, where it's just a part of everything that you're doing as a leader yourself, serving other people, going alongside them and guiding them where they need to go. I love the fact that the way in which you talk about engaging with people, the management leadership by walking around. It's coming alongside and sometimes debating, sometimes going back and forth, sharpening each other, that kind of guidance leadership, the Sherpa up the mountain,
Yeah, the sharpen the saw, I guess, is one of the terms that they use, right? Which is to just keep probing and keep picking at that. And then, in the 90s, I became much more aware of like personal development, behavioral assessments, Myers-Briggs, predictive index, things like that. So I really leaned into truly understanding what really makes the person tick, right? How do you have much more thoughtful conversations with them? How do you become more self-aware? And that self-awareness, my journey started, probably in the 90s around that. I was introduced to it and I really leaned into it because you find that it's very easy to get along with people that are just like you, right? We gravitate to people that are like us because it's easy. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of friction there. But the value is really in the diversity. The value is in creating teams that have a tremendous amount of behavioral diversity and even work experience diversity, so that you can come up with a better solution than the ones that you would naturally come up with. So that has been a really continuous part of my practice. And I know we'll talk about that a little bit, but I really try to get to know the person at their core, right? So if I get to know them at their core, I'm able to build a trusting relationship with them and dive into areas that maybe you wouldn't be able to dive into if indeed your relationship was nothing more than experiential, right? So we
Yeah.
generally, you know what I mean? So we generally, do you know Kevin? No, I don't know Kevin yet, but I've had 2 or 3 great experiences with Kevin. So therefore I want to have more great experiences with Kevin, right? And if you've worked in corporate America or worked in any sort of a company, right, you might have Bob or Lisa or someone who you had 1 or 2, and maybe they weren't such great initial conversations. So our natural tendency really then is to shy away from that a bit. It's maybe not lean into it and go a little bit deeper. Well, why? Because it's harder, right? So just as people, we tend to want to take the easy route. But when you're building a team, especially cross-functional teams or folks with a lot of different technology skills like we have today, you've really got to understand where they're coming from, whether that's extroversion versus introversion, whether that's independence versus collaboration, right? Whether that's steady Eddie or driving, or whether that's I need rules, or God, don't ever give me any rules. I don't want any rules, right? There's all sorts of dimensions of your behavior that the more you can probe on that and dig in, the more trusting relationship you can have, Kevin. And so you'd have the point where the magnet connects to each other instead of repelling against each other, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Perfect. I love that analogy. It's funny. I was thinking about magnets earlier while you were speaking, and I got to thinking about gemstones or crystals, just as an analogy, where I often find myself thinking of people as these beautiful faceted gemstones that when they're aligned right, and when you're in alignment with them, the way the light passes through you is just, well, not to be too poetic about it, but it's brilliant. But it requires you understanding the way light passes through them, the way those facets are fixed, where you can engage with someone in such a way that you bring the best out of each other and serve each other the best. And a good leader will understand what aspects of their team connect, where they overlap, where their magnets attract, where their light expands, and set people up, put people in those positions to really give the best to each other and serve each other the best. And that's when it happens, and when it's great, it is one of the most beautiful things you can be a part of, because you really do feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself.
Oh, it's so memorable, right? When it happens like that, when you're on a great team or you're working with great people, you carry that with you for the rest of your life. And there are a lot of experiences that I'm sure that we have both had, right? Where we were on teams and you're just shaking your head. You're like, my God, this is just not working. And then you have other teams where there's a certain cadence to it, right? There's a trusting factor. It just seems to click. And, if you think about those guys who go to battle and win a championship from in a sporting event, or do something great in a company, those teams stay together and have those memories forever. And you remember all of those people fondly, and then there's so many teams that were like, oh my God, you just want to put them out of your head, because for whatever reason, either you didn't have the right leadership, or you didn't have the right shared goal of what you were going after, or it was unclear, or for some reason you didn't have a trusting relationship with all of the folks there where you felt like you could say what you wanted to say and still be respected by that, right? There's a lot of people who show up on these teams who want to dominate the conversation, right? And my natural tendency as an independent person is to dominate the conversation. I don't need an agenda, Kevin. I just show up with my agenda and rip it and rip it. But in that particular regard, am I really engaging everybody else that's on that team? And the answer is no. So you're tying it back to your braid and the leadership, honing those leadership skills and recognizing those behavioral differences and diversity is, I think, really where I leaned into that and jump-started it, right? Which says, I've got to figure out a way to make these people win. We're making the company win, and we're going to make them wins, right? Because it's a shared responsibility. Because if the company wins, you want to make sure that your employees and your team win as well. But getting everybody aligned, making sure those goals are clear, making sure you had the right communication, making sure you had the right accountability, right? Being able to call people out who might not have been on the path, but do it in a thoughtful way, right? Because not everybody keeps the pace, right? Some people move a little slower, some people move a little faster. but it's recognizing those differences and being able to do that, to really capitalize on the human element, which is at the end of the day what it's all about.
Exactly. That's a nice place to pivot into getting specific. We're already talking a lot about basically what you do and how you approach your coaching, but let's get down into the ground floor here. I want to talk brass tacks. I've always loved that phrase. Let's get down to brass tacks.
Brass tacks. What are brass tacks anyway? Yeah.
So how I like to ask this these days is it's kind of a simple two-part question. Who do you coach and how do you coach them? Almost like I got you in the interrogation room. It's like, what did you know and when did you know it?
Yeah.
So the
Yes.
who obviously being like who you focus your coaching on, if it's, largely C-suite executives and their teams or like that kind of who, and then the how being like one-to-one, which obviously every coach does at some level, but do you also have group coaching or keynote speeches or courses that you host and run? So yeah, who do you coach and how do you coach them?
Yeah, my clients are primarily CEOs and executive leaders of businesses. Really, the range of businesses that I serve, I would say, would be in the small to mid-sized business, so $2 to $40 million range. Those folks that have a good growth mindset and are looking to improve not just their business, but all aspects of their life, right? Because at the end of the day, if your work is healthy, if your personal relationships are healthy, if your finance is healthy, and if you are physically healthy, guess what? You are just going to be a better leader. You're going to be a better person, right? So I try to really probe in and have longer term relationships with folks where I get to know them real well and help them on their journey. From my services perspective, I do one-on-one performance coaching, of course, as you mentioned. I am in the process right now of starting up a couple of new mastermind groups with a company called Growth 10. So I'm in the process of selecting members for that right now. I have been running a CEO group, multiple CEO groups through the Enterprise Center at Salem State University for local businesses up in Massachusetts. I've been doing that for about 6 or 7 years now. I also provide coaching, facilitation, and teaching services to leverage growth operating systems for businesses. So if you think about many CEOs, right, have to create it on their own. Well,
Yeah.
if you've ever read Traction or the Entrepreneurial Operating System or Scaling Up, right, there are a variety of different systems there that you can plug into an organization to help them grow. So I've partnered with Cruise and Company to basically utilize their their growth operating system to help businesses implement something that is accountable, very focused on defining the goals, and it just helps them routinize that and create habits around it so that they're not figuring out, well, what do I do in my operations? What do I do over here? How should I run my finances, right? There's a lot of decisions to make. So why not use something that's a proven process, especially for businesses of that size? So I also teach that as well. So.
I don't want this to turn into an advertisement for EOS, but a couple of my clients use EOS, and it really does everything that you say and then some. It really does take away that burden of feeling like, or actually having to reinvent the wheel yourself for every aspect of your business. There's so much weight that it distributes and carries forward. Really does free you up to do the thing that you want to do with your business, to be focused on growth and growing yourself and your business and your team. I don't want to turn into a commercial for that, but I am a big fan of EOS.
All right. Yeah. And so you're not worried about what your meeting cadence is or what your OKRs are. I mean, you've gone through that process and you've figured it out, right? So that's exactly right. So I do that because to me, it's not just providing them with insights into how they can be better leaders, but if I can also provide them with the tools that they need to run a better business, the goal is to get them out of doing stuff that is just in the business all the time and get them to do stuff that's on the business, right? And if you're always like running from meeting to meeting, or you're just on the hamster wheel, or you're not prioritizing your calendar, you're not doing all of those things that are absolutely critical for your success, you're just exhausted at the end of the week. Okay, I mean, is it really great to have yet another 80 or 90-hour week? No, it's not. It's not great at all. It epically sucks, really. But when you're doing it, you think you have to keep doing it because everybody else seems to be doing it. Well, how do you get out of that mindset? How do you realize that there's a different way to do it? And you can be successful doing it in a much different way. So.
And that, to me, that really is the heart of why coaching is not just powerful, but I think it's necessary, because what you do is you need that interrupt to change your mindset, to see things differently, that it's hard to do that on your own, or it's hard to have that happen for you without something catastrophic or life-changing to occur. And what a coach, I feel like the role they specialize in, coaches come in and they allow you to see things from a different perspective, to understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, your intentions behind it. And then to also, on top of that, have systems and tools to help you to change and then establish a new mindset, a new system that's sustainable in a way that will keep you healthy and happy and have your business healthy and happy. I feel like coaches are really uniquely positioned to best serve in that way. And it's business changing, it's team changing, it's life changing.
Yeah, and many, as you know, many of the CEOs, right, as you go through your phases of growth, your business when you're a $1 to $3 million business is much different than when it's a $3 to $10 million business, and much different. So there are these little chasms that you need to cross over, right? So at the beginning of your journey, right, everybody on the team is a generalist because you're trying to get everything kind of done as best you possibly can. Eventually, you need to bring in functional leaders, though, who are really, really good at that. The CEO, right? The CEO was good at something. The CEO was good at the vision. They were good at product development. They were great at sales. They were great at marketing, whatever those, but it doesn't make the CEO great at everything. So you've got a lot of CEOs, right, to figure out, well, how do I do this, right? And now you've got, well, you need to be really great at digital transformation. You need to be really great at digital media. You need to be really great at a whole bunch of things that you may not be great at, or you may not be able to skill up, right, in your organizations. So how do you reconcile that? How do you get comfortable with partnering with companies that for the person doesn't work with you, right? I mean, you're borrowing them, right? But you've got to get comfortable doing that in today's world, whether it be cybersecurity or digital transformation or social media or figuring out what to do on TikTok. I mean, all of these businesses, they're not going to have all of those skills on staff to do that. But many of those entrepreneurs or leaders are not yet comfortable with contracting out to third parties for those services. So there's an awful lot of change that goes in, right? The CEO is a lonely position. You don't really have that many people to talk to. So having a coach to talk to and someone you can just bounce an idea off of or pick up the phone and scream at every once in a while, because you can't really ask your employees all of those questions. And generally speaking, you can't ask your family most of those questions. So that's why either a mastermind group, which I think is really awesome for group think and getting different perspectives, right, from different industries and things like that to help solve your problems, or having that one-on-one coach that you trust and you value, who can just help you think through things, right? My goal isn't to give them the answer. My goal is to give them the landscape so that they can make the right answer.
It always comes back to that. Better questions.
Better questions.
Yeah, I want to jealously keep you all day. Like this conversation, this is my meat and potatoes. This is stuff that gets me out of the bed in the morning. I love this, but we've already, like I promised, I've been watching the clock and we're already going a little bit past where I usually like to go. So before I let you go, I'll thank you now, and I'll thank you again later. Thank you for this conversation. This has been fantastic. Totally. Where can people find out more about you? And two-part question: where can people best connect with you? Like if they want to send you messages or get on a meeting or have a strategy call, like, so where can people just learn more about who you are and what you do? And then how can they connect with you?
The easiest thing is just go to my LinkedIn profile. It's just Swebman, SWEBMAN, up there at LinkedIn. And right in the header file, it basically says book a meeting. So it's just a clickable link. You can go and book the meeting. For folks who are more traditional and just want to reach out via email, it's just Stephen@wellfleetenterprises.com.
I love that email qualifies as traditional.
Yeah. Well, right. Some people love email, Yeah.
I also accept handwritten letters, but I think email is more my traditional speed.
I do. My address is no.
No. Well, Stephen, thank you so much for chatting with me today. This has been great. I already feel the urge to have you back on for a part 2, just so we can keep exploring some of these ideas. But I'll wait till this episode airs before I do that. But it has been fantastic, and just thanks for talking and thanks for doing what you do.
My pleasure, Kevin. Thank you so much for having me on the show, and happy to come back whenever you think it's right.
Awesome. We will talk to you again very soon.
Thanks.